Is every civilization doomed to fail? A city without sound. The city is still standing. That is what makes it unsettling. Stone streets stretch outward beneath a heavy sky, perfectly shaped, perfectly empty. Towers rise without damage, yet no voices echo between them. Markets remain frozen in time. Tools rest where hands once held them. There is no smoke, no movement, no sign of life. Not destruction, but absence. This is how many civilizations end. Not with an explosion, not with a scream, but with silence. And that silence raises a question that has followed humanity for thousands of years. If this civilization fell, will all civilizations fall? The scar in the wall. Archaeologists often notice the smallest details first. A crack in a wall, a repaired foundation, a street that was rebuilt one time too many. These are not dramatic clues. They do not appear in legends. They rarely make headlines. But they tell the most important story. Because before every civilization goes silent, something is ignored. Something visible. Something familiar. Something dismissed as temporary. The end never begins at the end. It begins earlier. Returning to the first cities. To understand collapse, we must return to the beginning. Long before nations. Long before empires. Long before writing. Humans gathered near rivers. The Tigris and Euphrates. The Nile. The industry. The Yellow River. Water meant survival. It meant food. It meant stability. Near these rivers, people stopped moving. They built homes. They planted crops. They stored grain. For the first time in history, humans believed they had control over tomorrow. When safety becomes confidence. At first, civilization felt like a miracle. Farming worked. Floods followed patterns. Seasons could be predicted. Communities grew larger. Specialists appeared. Builders, traders, planners. People were no longer just surviving. They were planning. And planning created confidence. Confidence that nature could be managed. Confidence that systems would hold. Confidence that growth was safe. That confidence would shape everything that followed. The first rise. Early cities expanded carefully. Mud bricks formed walls. Canals carried water across dry land. Grain was stored for lean years. These systems worked at first. Surpluses grew. Populations increased. Trade networks expanded. Civilization proved itself useful. And usefulness encouraged complexity. But complexity is never free. The hidden trade-off. Every new solution solved a problem and introduced a new risk. More food meant more people. More people meant more demand. More demand meant tighter margins. Farming required precise timing. Water systems required constant maintenance. Trade required stability. Small failures could now ripple outward. What once was flexible became delicate. Civilization was no longer just shelter. It was a system. The first cracks appear. Collapse rarely begins with catastrophe. It begins with inconvenience. A canal that needs repairing more often. A harvest that produces slightly less. A wall reinforced again and again. Leaders promise adjustments. Engineers offer fixes. People remain confident. Because civilizations don't fail when people panic. They fail when people believe the problem is temporary. The illusion of control. Across ancient history, the pattern repeats. In Mesopotamia, irrigation slowly poisoned the soil with salt. In Egypt, power centralized so tightly that disruption became fatal. In the Indus Valley, rivers shifted beyond prediction. Different environments, different cultures, the same mistake. Success created dependency. Dependency reduced flexibility. Flexibility loss increased risk. Control became an illusion. The human blind spot. Humans are excellent builders. But historically, we struggle to stop. Civilizations rarely ask, should we slow down? They ask, how do we expand further? Growth is rewarded. Expansion is celebrated. Restraint is misunderstood. Yet growth amplifies every weakness in the system. The bigger the structure, the harder it falls. The moment before the fall, every civilization reaches a moment of warning, not collapse, a moment when multiple stresses align. In Rome, borders stretched too far. In the Maya world, forests vanished and rains failed. On Easter Island, resources dwindled beyond recovery. The evidence was visible, but momentum drowned it out. Why no one stops it? Because collapse is uneven. Some regions suffer first. Others remain comfortable. The wealthy are insulated. The center feels stable. Warnings feel distant. By the time instability reaches the core, The structure is already compromised. Collapse does not arrive all at once. It arrives in layers. The shock that history remembers. When collapse finally becomes visible, history records the spectacle. Invasions, plagues, rebellions, natural disasters. But these are rarely the cause. They are the final stress on an already weakened system. The real collapse began decades, or centuries, earlier. In quiet decisions, in delayed responses, in risks accepted as normal. The question that won't go away. After studying ruins across continents and millennia, historians confront an unsettling idea. Is collapse a failure? Or is it a phase? Civilizations rise. They peak. They strain. They fall. Again and again. Is this coincidence or design? The dangerous belief of uniqueness. Every civilization believes it is different, more advanced, more knowledgeable, more prepared. Every fallen society believed collapse happened to others, never to them. That belief may be the most dangerous feature of civilization itself. A pattern beneath the ruins. Across ancient cities, archaeologists have found something unexpected. Not the same buildings, not the same tools, not the same culture, but the same structural pattern. Growth, optimization, dependency, strain, repeating across geography and time, suggesting collapse is not random. If collapse follows a pattern, if civilizations are built with the seeds of their own failure, then the most important question is not why ancient societies fell. It is whether modern civilization has already entered the same phase. Because if the pattern is real, then silence does not arrive suddenly. It arrives quietly, long before anyone notices. Pressure, not fire. Collapse does not announce itself with flames. It does not begin with screams or sirens. It begins with pressure. Slow, unrelenting, almost invisible. Pressure on food, pressure on water, pressure on trust, pressure on systems that were never designed to carry infinite weight. By the time collapse becomes visible, it has already been happening for generations. This is where civilizations truly begin to die. Every civilization runs on systems, not ideas, not monuments, not armies. Systems. Food systems that turn soil into survival. Water systems that make settlement possible. Trade systems that move resources across distance. Power systems that organize decision-making. Belief systems that explain why the system deserves loyalty. As long as these systems function, life feels normal. When one weakens, others compensate. But compensation has limits. When one system fails, no system exists alone. Food depends on water. Water depends on climate. Trade depends on trust. Power depends on legitimacy. When one system fails, others strain. When multiple systems strain at once, civilization enters dangerous territory. Not collapse yet, but instability. The illusion of stability. Imagine a tower made of stone. From the outside, it looks immovable, solid, permanent. Inside, a single block cracks. Then another. No one notices. The tower still stands. Civilizations behave the same way. As long as daily life continues, people assume stability is real. But stability is often just momentum. Food. The first silent failure. Food is the foundation of everything. Without it, nothing else matters. History is clear on this point. When food systems weaken, civilizations follow. In ancient Mesopotamia, irrigation allowed farming in dry land. But over time, salt accumulated in the soil. Yields dropped. Crops weakened. Harvests shrank. The land was being slowly poisoned by success. Adaptation has a limit. At first, people adapted. New crops, different fields, more labor. These solutions worked for a while. But adaptation has limits. Eventually, every workaround costs more energy than it saves. That is when systems begin to fail permanently. Growth shrinks the margin for error. Success brings growth. Growth brings demand. Demand removes margin. A small village can survive a bad harvest. A massive city cannot. As populations rise, tolerance for failure disappears. One bad season becomes dangerous. Two become destabilizing. Three become catastrophic. Many ancient cities lived one harvest away from collapse. Water, the lifeline that moves. Water creates civilization. But water is never fixed. Rivers shift. Rain patterns change. Groundwater declines. The cities of the Indus Valley were engineering marvels. Carefully planned, perfectly drained, remarkably clean. But when rivers changed course, The cities lost their reason to exist. They were not destroyed. They were abandoned. Walking away instead of falling. The Indus example challenges modern assumptions. There was no last stand. No collapse spectacle. People moved. Settlements shrank. Life reorganized. The civilization ended. The people survived. This distinction matters. Climate is not the enemy. Climate change is not new. It has shaped human history since the beginning. Ice ages, droughts, flood cycles. Civilizations did not collapse because climate changed. They collapsed because they were built to remain the same. Rigidity, not climate, was fatal. Flexibility versus rigidity. They decentralize. They relocate. Rigid societies resist. They double down. They preserve hierarchy. Rigidity turns stress into collapse. Complexity, power with a price. As civilizations grow, they become complex. More laws, more institutions, more specialists, more coordination. Complexity creates power, but it also creates dependency. No one understands the whole system anymore. Everyone depends on someone else. Chains that cannot break. In complex systems, everything is connected. Farmers depend on water managers. Water managers depend on labor. Labor depends on food distribution. Distribution depends on administration. Break one link, the entire chain weakens. The cost of maintenance. Complex systems require constant energy. Roads must be repaired. Walls must be defended. Bureaucracies must be fed. Armies must be supplied. Early growth pays for this. Later, maintenance consumes everything. Civilizations begin spending all their energy just staying alive. Innovation slows. Adaptation stalls. The trap of past success. Past success is dangerous. It convinces societies that what worked before will always work again. But environments change. Resources decline. Conditions shift. Civilizations cling to old solutions because they once brought glory. That loyalty becomes fatal. Power concentrates. Over time, power centralizes. Land, food, decision-making. Elites emerge. At first, centralization creates efficiency. Later, it creates blindness. Information from the ground stops flowing upward. Reality becomes filtered. The elite bubble. Archaeology reveals a disturbing pattern. During collapse, elites often lived comfortably until the end. Well-built homes, imported goods, protected districts. Meanwhile, ordinary people struggled. By the time elites felt the crisis, the system had already failed. Inequality as a force multiplier. Inequality alone does not cause collapse, but it magnifies every problem. Scarcity becomes conflict. Stress becomes resentment. Trust evaporates. Civilization requires cooperation. Inequality destroys cooperation. The collapse of trust. Trust is invisible, but everything depends on it. Trust in leaders. Trust in systems. Trust that sacrifice will be shared. When trust breaks, rules stop matching. Trade slows. People act for survival, not society. Collapse accelerates. The invasion myth. History often blames invasions, but invasions usually come last. Weak systems invite attack. Divided societies cannot defend. Hungry populations lose loyalty. Invasion is often the final symptom, not the cause. Rome is a case study. Rome did not fall suddenly. It weakened over centuries. Borders expanded. Defense costs exploded. Politics fractured. Trust eroded. Rome was powerful, but brittle. Pressure mounted from every direction. Eventually, the structure cracked. The Maya example. The Maya mastered their environment. They engineered water, managed forests, built resilient cities. For centuries, it worked. Then droughts intensified. Cities emptied. Quietly. Collapse is often invisible. This is the hardest truth. Collapse does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like migration, shrinking populations, lower expectations, simpler lives. People adapt downward until civilization becomes something else. The pattern that repeats across continents, across cultures, across millennia. The same forces appear. Resource stress, complexity overload, inequality, rigidity, loss of trust. Different names. Same outcome. The uncomfortable mirror. If collapse follows patterns, if warnings repeat, if civilizations always believe they are different, then the question becomes unavoidable. Are we different? Or are we repeating history with better technology? A structural discovery. Modern historians began comparing collapses structurally, not culturally, not morally, structurally. They found a pattern. Civilizations collapse when multiple stresses align at once, not one failure. Several. The point of no return. Once too many systems fail together, recovery becomes nearly impossible. Adaptation slows. Trust vanishes. Energy drains. Civilization crosses a line and cannot step back. Some civilizations saw collapse coming. They wrote about it. They warned about it. They tried to stop it and still failed. Because once the invisible forces align, no amount of wisdom is enough. The threshold no one sees. There is a moment in every civilization's life when the future quietly changes direction. No alarms sound. No monuments fall. No final decision is announced. Instead, a threshold is crossed. A thin, invisible line separating recovery from inevitability. On one side, problems are still solvable. On the other, solutions only delay the end. This moment is called the point of no return, and almost no one recognizes it while it is happening. The illusion of continuity. Civilizations are built to feel permanent. Streets still fill. Markets still function. Laws are still enforced. Leaders still give speeches. Daily life continues. And that continuity creates a dangerous illusion that tomorrow will resemble yesterday. But collapse does not interrupt life all at once. It erodes it quietly, underneath the surface. The warnings that accumulate. Before collapse, warnings multiply. Harvests grow less reliable. Taxes increase. Public trust weakens. Political debates turn bitter. People notice. They talk about it. They complain. They worry. But awareness does not equal action. The language of delay. Every civilization develops the same phrases. This is temporary. We've survived worse. The situation is under control. Change would be too disruptive. Leaders calm. Merchants reassure. Religious figures offer comfort. Citizens cling to normalcy. Delay becomes policy. Why big systems cannot turn quickly? Civilizations are massive machines. Every decision affects millions. Every reform disrupts livelihoods. Every change threatens power structures. Consensus becomes rare. Fear of consequences outweighs fear of collapse. So leaders choose delay, not because they are foolish, but because the system punishes speed. The comfort trap. Collapse rarely begins when life is unbearable. It begins when life is still comfortable enough to resist change. People fear losing what they have. They fear instability more than decline. They fear reform more than stagnation. So they defend the present, even as it quietly decays. The tipping point. Historians studying collapse noticed something critical. Civilizations can survive single crises. A drought, a war, an economic shock. They can even survive two. But when multiple stresses arrive at the same time, food shortages, water instability, economic strain, political division, environmental change, that is the tipping point. When solutions increase fragility. At the point of no return, civilizations still try to fix themselves. But their fixes come at a cost. New laws, higher taxes, more bureaucracy, greater control. Each reform adds complexity. Each control reduces flexibility. The system grows heavier, less able to adapt. And adaptation is survival. Rome sees the danger. Rome understood it was in trouble. Historical records show warnings. Debates, reforms, emergency measures. Taxes rose to pay the army. The army expanded to secure borders. Borders expanded to access resources. Each solution solved one problem and created another. Strength becomes the enemy. Rome did not cross the line when it became weak. It crossed the line when maintaining strength became too expensive. Power required constant defense. Defense required constant resources. Resources became harder to extract. The empire fed on itself to survive. The cost of holding everything together. Empires are not just large. They are fragile. Roads require repair. Walls require guards. Officials require payment. Armies require food. As resources decline, maintenance consumes everything. Progress stops. Innovation fades. Survival becomes the goal. The moment belief begins to fade. Civilization is held together by belief. Belief in leadership. Belief in fairness. Belief in shared sacrifice. Belief in the future. When belief weakens, cooperation weakens. People stop asking, what is best for us? They ask, What is best for me? From collective to individual survival, this shift is subtle but devastating. Food is hidden, wealth is buried, taxes are avoided, rules are ignored, trust collapses faster than buildings. And no amount of force can restore trust once it is gone. What the ruins reveal, archaeology captures this moment. Homes fortified against neighbors, valuables concealed, public spaces abandoned, community infrastructure neglected. These are not signs of invasion. They are signs of fear and social breakdown. Collapse is unraveling. Collapse is not a single event. It is a process. Institutions weaken. Services disappear. Knowledge fragments. Skills vanish. Life becomes smaller, simpler, more local. Civilization does not fall. It unravels. The illusion of survival. At the point of no return, civilization still appears alive. Cities still stand. Markets still operate. Authorities still rule. But the system that made civilization powerful, complex, cooperative, resilient, is already gone. What remains is a shell. Why recovery rarely succeeds. Recovery demands stability. But collapse destroys stability first. Trade networks fail. Skilled labor disappears. Knowledge transmission breaks. Trust evaporates. Rebuilding takes generations. Most civilizations do not have that time. Complexity's fatal weakness. Simple societies adapt easily. Complex societies do not. Complexity requires constant coordination, constant energy, constant trust. When stability fades, complexity becomes a liability, and collapse accelerates. The illusion of control. Humans believe they control civilization, but civilization controls human behavior. It rewards growth, punishes restraint, encourages expansion, even when expansion is dangerous. Civilization shapes choices, even when those choices lead to collapse. Knowing is not enough. One of history's most unsettling discoveries is this. Civilizations often understand collapse intellectually. They record warnings. They debate solutions. They predict consequences. But they cannot agree on what to sacrifice. And sacrifice is required. The most dangerous belief. There is still time. This belief delays action, softens urgency, postpones hard decisions. More civilizations have fallen from waiting than from attack. Acceptance in the records. In the final records of several collapsed societies, historians found something unexpected. Not panic, not chaos. Acceptance. People stopped trying to save the system. They prepared for life after it. Planning for the end. Communities became smaller. Trade localized. Expectations lowered. Lives simplified. Civilization was no longer the goal. Survival was. The question that changes everything. When people stop believing civilization can be saved and begin planning for its end, what comes next? Is collapse the end of humanity or the beginning of something else? Next, we confront the final phase of collapse. What happens after civilization breaks apart? Why survival does not mean victory, and why some societies emerge wiser, while others disappear forever. When the world doesn't end, when a civilization collapses, the world does not end. The sun still rises. Rivers still follow their ancient paths. Seasons continue without concern for human systems. Children are born. Animals graze. The sky remains unchanged. Collapse does not arrive as an apocalypse. It arrives as a quiet transformation, one that reshapes life without stopping it. A world without rules. Imagine waking up in a city that no longer works. The streets are familiar. The buildings are still standing. The walls still mark old boundaries. But something essential is missing. No guards watch the gates. No officials enforce laws. No authorities explain what comes next. People step outside expecting order and find only uncertainty. The absence of authority. After collapse, authority dissolves first. There are no announcements. No formal endings. No declarations of failure. Messages stop traveling. Commands are no longer obeyed. Power simply evaporates. People wait for leadership to return. It does not. Silence takes over. Silence spreads through collapsed systems. Not peaceful silence, but the silence of interruption. Trade routes go quiet. Messengers stop arriving. Markets lose their rhythm. Civilization once hummed with coordination. Now it hesitates. The myth of chaos. Popular stories imagine collapse as violent chaos. History tells a different story. Most people do not riot. They do not immediately fight. They do not destroy everything around them. They adapt. Life contracts instead of exploding. After collapse, life becomes smaller. Cities empty slowly. Families move closer together. Communities shrink to manageable size. People abandon scale. Civilization does not explode, it contracts. The end of the big world. Before collapse, people live in vast systems. Trade stretches across continents. Ideas move quickly. Power reaches far. After collapse, distance becomes dangerous. The world shrinks to a village, a valley, a river. Beyond that, uncertainty begins. Why knowledge begins to fade. One of collapse's deepest losses is invisible knowledge. Writing fades first. Engineering knowledge disappears. Complex skills vanish. Not because people forget, but because knowledge needs support systems. Schools, records, specialists, institutions. Without them, complexity dissolves. The fragility of intelligence. Civilizations store knowledge outside the human mind. In books, in buildings, in systems. When those systems fail, knowledge becomes heavy and impossible to carry forward intact. What survives is what is simple. Rome's slow disappearance. After Rome collapsed, people did not call it collapse. They noticed smaller changes. Roads cracked and were not repaired. Coins vanished from daily trade. Stone buildings were dismantled for survival. Rome did not fall loudly. It faded quietly, over centuries. Why recovery takes so long? Recovery is not automatic. Collapsed systems take generations to rebuild. Trade networks must reform. Trust must return. Skills must be relearned. Sometimes recovery takes centuries. Sometimes it never fully happens. The Bronze Age collapse. Around 1200 BCE, civilizations across the eastern Mediterranean failed almost simultaneously. Trade routes disappeared. Cities emptied or burned. Writing systems vanished. For generations, history went silent. This was not a single collapse. It was a systemic failure. Life becomes local. After collapse, survival depends on proximity. Neighbors matter more than rulers. Skills matter more than titles. Trust matters more than laws. People return to fundamentals. Food, shelter, protection. Everything else becomes secondary. The emergence of new orders. Collapse creates space. Old hierarchies disappear. New leaders emerge. New cultures form. History does not freeze. It reshapes itself, unevenly, unpredictably. Why civilizations rarely return? Collapsed civilizations almost never return in their original form. Rome never re-emerged. Maya cities remained empty. Indus cities stayed silent. New societies arise, but they are different. History moves forward, not backward. The emotional cost of collapse. Beyond ruins and records lies human loss. Loss of identity. Loss of belonging. Loss of meaning. People who trusted civilization feel betrayed. The system that promised security failed. The first generation after collapse remembers. They speak of smoother roads, full markets, reliable order. They compare the past to the present and feel the loss deeply. The generation that cannot imagine, their children listen, but cannot imagine. By the second or third generation, collapse feels normal. This is how civilizations truly disappear. When memory fades. Humanity endures, civilization does not. Collapse does not end humanity. Humans survive. Communities adapt. Life continues. But survival is not progress. It is endurance. The reset of potential. Every collapse resets human achievement. Technologies vanish. Ideas are lost. Futures disappear before they begin. Each fall costs centuries of progress. Why this matters? Collapse does not only destroy buildings. It destroys unrealized futures. Discoveries never made. Ideas never explored. Worlds that never exist. The message written in absence. Ruins speak quietly. Not through monuments, but through what is missing. Missing systems. Missing voices. Missing continuity. Absence becomes the message. Rethinking collapse. For centuries, collapse was seen only as tragedy. But new research suggests something unsettling. Some collapses were not accidents. They were choices. When collapse is chosen, some societies recognize danger. They saw complexity become risk. They saw growth become threat. They saw systems become fragile. And they stepped back. The final question: if collapse can be a decision, if ending a system can be a form of survival, then what does that say about civilization itself? Is collapse always failure? Or is it sometimes wisdom? Now, we confront the most uncomfortable truth of all, whether civilization is meant to last forever, or whether knowing when to let go is the highest form of intelligence humanity has ever achieved. The ruins are quiet now, stone walls still stand, long after the voices that built them have faded. Paths remain where millions once walked, following routines that once felt permanent. Civilizations leave behind more than broken structures. They leave patterns. Patterns in stone, patterns in memory, patterns in absence. Every fallen civilization once believed it had solved the problem of survival. And yet, silence followed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but inevitably. The question that refuses to disappear: civilizations fall. History is clear about that. But the question that refuses to disappear is not how they fall. Wars, disasters, and economic breakdowns are well documented. The deeper question is why they keep falling in the same way. Across continents, across centuries, across cultures that never met. The details change. The pattern does not. The pattern humanity cannot unsee. Civilizations rise by solving problems. They organize food production. They manage labor. They coordinate defense and trade. As these systems succeed, societies grow more complex. Layers of administration appear. Specialization increases. Dependence deepens. Eventually, complexity stops serving people, and people begin serving complexity. This is not coincidence. It is structure. Why intelligence does not save civilizations? It seems logical to assume that smarter societies should last longer. But history repeatedly challenges this belief. The most advanced civilizations often collapse the hardest. Their systems are powerful, but tightly interconnected. Their successes leave little room for failure. When one system breaks, others follow. Intelligence builds impressive structures, but intelligence also builds fragile ones. Technology is not a shield. Every era believes its tools will prevent collapse. Bronze weapons once symbolized dominance. Iron tools reshaped agriculture. Road networks unified empires. Machines transformed production. Technology solves problems, but it also accelerates them. Growth speeds up. Extraction intensifies. Decisions carry greater consequences. Mistakes move faster than wisdom. The speed of collapse increases over time. Early civilizations often declined slowly. Generations adapted to gradual change. Collapse unfolded across centuries. Modern systems move differently. Trade is instant. Communication is global. Failures travel faster than recovery. The stronger the network, the more fragile it becomes. Speed amplifies vulnerability. The illusion of permanent progress. Civilization tells a comforting story. That history always moves forward. That knowledge accumulates. That progress is permanent. But ruins tell a different story. Progress pauses. Progress reverses. Progress disappears. Stability is borrowed. Continuity is fragile. Nothing is guaranteed. Why collapse feels impossible? Until it happens. Inside a functioning civilization, collapse feels unimaginable. Systems feel too big to fail. Institutions feel permanent. Routines feel eternal. Every fallen civilization believed the same thing. The end never feels possible until it is unavoidable. The human problem at the core, at the center of collapse, is not climate alone, not invasion alone, not disaster alone. It is human behavior, short-term thinking, fear of loss, resistance to change, desire for comfort. These traits built civilization. They also undermine it. The paradox of success. Success creates stability. Stability creates confidence. Confidence creates rigidity. Systems that once solved problems become sacred. Questioning them feels dangerous. Changing them feels risky. But refusing to change becomes fatal. Success locks behavior in place. Why warnings rarely work. History is filled with warnings. Philosophers wrote about decay. Leaders spoke of limits. Citizens sensed imbalance. Warnings require sacrifice. And sacrifice is unpopular. So warnings are delayed, dismissed, ignored, not because they are wrong, but because they are uncomfortable. The role of choice. Collapse is not always forced. Often, it is chosen indirectly. Chosen by delaying reform. Chosen by protecting privilege. Chosen by avoiding discomfort. Civilizations choose familiarity, even when familiarity leads to decline. Evidence from modern research. Modern researchers compare ancient collapses with modern systems. They see familiar signals: resource strain, rising inequality, institutional rigidity, loss of public trust. The names differ. The structure is the same. History does not repeat, but it rhymes. The question of escape. Can civilization avoid collapse? History offers no simple answer. Some societies adapted and survived longer. Some transformed into something new. Many disappeared entirely. No civilization has proven collapse impossible. Only postponable. Adaptation versus transformation. Survival does not mean preservation. It means change. Laws shift. Values evolve. Power redistributes. Civilizations that survive do so by becoming something else. Those unwilling to transform eventually break. The fear no one likes to face. True survival may require limits. Less expansion, less consumption, less complexity. But civilization is built on growth. And growth resists restraint. The hardest change is knowing when to stop. The silent choice ahead. Humanity now stands where others once stood. With knowledge of the past. With tools beyond imagination. With power unmatched in history. And with the same instincts. The same blind spots. The same risks. Awareness does not guarantee wisdom. What the ruins are really saying. Ruins are not warnings carved in stone. They are mirrors. They reflect what happens when societies believe. This cannot happen to us. Every civilization thought it was different. None were. The final, uncomfortable truth. Civilizations do not collapse because they are evil. They collapse because they are human. Built by human hands. Driven by human desires. Limited by human nature. This truth is neither comforting nor cruel. It is simply real. The last question that remains. If collapse is part of civilization. If complexity always carries risk. If growth always creates pressure. Then the question is not, will civilization fall? But, what kind of civilization rises afterward? And whether humanity will remember or repeat the same story again. An ending that is not an ending. History does not conclude. It continues. Civilizations fall. Others rise. Humans endure. The ruins of the future are already being shaped, not with stone, but with choices.